Welcome to Action Hound Media, the site and channel all about action. Life's boring, get some more action into your life. Today we're going to mainly focus on boxing. We're going to talk about the origins of boxing, and we're going to cover a more recent topic of what's worse, getting repetitive blows during the course of a match or like one quick knockout punch. But before we get to that, let's talk about the origins of boxing. The origins of boxing dates back thousands of years and has evolved significantly over time. So here's a little bit of a breakdown. It started in prehistoric times. There's evidence of carvings from ancient Sumer, which is Iraq, around 3000 BTE, showing people fist fighting. I'm guessing that it was either a ritualistic or a form of training for combat way back when. If you think intuitively, if you don't have any weapons and you want to punch somebody, hurt somebody, you're going to use your fists, right? So it makes sense. It makes sense that even back in very primitive times, this is what has been going on. In ancient Egypt, the date around 1350 BC, there's depictions of artwork showing fighters using fists and being watched by spectators. So this may have been like an earlier form of organized boxing, where they have actually fought in some kind of an arena. Also in ancient Greece, boxing was a sport known as pygmachia. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's the name of the sport. And then it became a popular Olympic event in 688 BC. So back then there were very few rules, no rounds, no weight classes, and often fights ended in severe injury or death. So they were really brutal back then, huh? So the gear worn in ancient Greece for boxing were leather straps wrapped around the fists for protection and also, so you could damage your opponents. Then in ancient Rome, there was a more brutal form of boxing where the boxers wore metal-studded gloves. So you can imagine what that kind of fighting was. Often the matches ended in death, especially in the gladiatorial type of combats that were used in those days. So they had gladiator matches where boxers would wear metal gloves and just beat the crap out of each other until somebody died, which is pretty sick. So eventually boxing was outlawed in 393 when Emperor Theodosius banned pagan festivals and this type of sports. In the modern era, boxing came into fruition in the 17th and 18th century in England. Bare knuckle boxing emerged and was sort of a type of prize fighting. There were no gloves and few rules, and this was very brutal form of boxing. James Figg in the early 1700s was considered the first boxing champions. Eventually they introduced more rules. So they had the Jack Brunton's rules in 1743, introduced a boxing ring and outlawed hitting a downed opponent. Eventually they turned to our modern day rules, the Marquis of Queensberry rules. That started in 1867. So you were wearing gloves now. Gloves were required to fight. There were 3-minute rounds, and there was actually a 10-second knockout rule. Today, we all know boxing is a very popular sport. It's globally regulated sport with amateur and professional levels. It's also featured in the Olympics since 1904. And some of the major bodies are the WBC, the WBA, the IBF, and the WBO. But here's another interesting thing about boxing that I always wondered about is like, what's worse? Going 10 rounds and getting punched over and over again over the course of the 10 rounds? I mean, guys can get hit over 100 times, and that time's bad. Or is it worse to get like one punch that knocks you out, right? Very interesting question, but you got to also remember that when you're boxing and you're wearing gloves, the gloves are softer, sure, but every time you get punched in the face, there's a phenomenon called the Konjaku phenomenon where your brain, which is in a liquid inside your skull, it bounces back and forth. So when you get punched in the face, your brain hits the back of your skull and then the front of your skull and bounces back and forth. And that causes a lot of brain damage. So my intuitive feeling is that with repetitive punches are like worse than like a one-punch knockout. You talk to neuroscientists and doctors and that sort of thing, what do they come up with? Well, there's also Dr. Google. So the short answer is repetitive punches over 10 rounds are generally more damaging to the brain long-term than a single one-punch knockout, even though the knockout looks more dramatic. The Kachiku phenomenon, which causes a cumulative subconcussive, which causes a cumulative effect of all these blows. Each punch may not cause a concussion, but subconcussive hits still shake the brain. Like I said, the Kachiku phenomenon. And over time, these add up, increasing the risk of CTE. Now, we saw that with football players, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, where football players get a lot of brain damage from constantly hitting each other with the helmet, even with the helmets on, and damaging their brains, where they go crazy later in life and do crazy stupid things. Antonio Brown, for instance, depression, cognitive decline. And then, the other problem is like the duration of all these hits, of all the exposure to taking shots. I mean, in 10 rounds, you could sustain hundreds of punches to the head and body. The brain absorbs repeated trauma without full recovery time. Even with headgear, like in amateur boxing, the brain still moves inside the skull. So you still have that Kachiku phenomenon, which can cause repetitive damage. And then there's the delayed effects from this kind of brain damage. Fighters can appear fine during the match, but experience post-fight symptoms like confusion, headaches, blurred speech, emotional instability. So why are one-punch knockouts, why are they less damaging? Well, one is you have immediate shutdown. A KO is typically caused by a sudden rotational force that temporarily shuts down the brain's function, and you experience the loss of consciousness. Ironically, this quick shutdown might prevent further damage because the fight stops immediately. So this immediate shutdown stops you from sustaining the ongoing rounds and more damage. That, of course, means you're getting hit fewer times. If a fighter gets knocked out early, they receive far fewer total blows than going 10 rounds. But a one-punch KO can still be serious, especially as the head hits the canvas like a secondary impact. There's prolonged unconsciousness or possibly seizures. If you're a professional boxer or an amateur boxer even, those repetitive knockouts over a career can really be damaging for your brain. So I would say the solution to this and to prevent further damage to people's brains is, well, you're not going to outlaw boxing, but another alternative is bare knuckle brawling, where guys will get knocked out, and it's more exciting watching guys get knocked out. And maybe also what happens a lot in bare knuckle brawling is they get cut up more. It's a lot bloodier and looks more violent. Yeah, sure, that's bad, but let's just say if there's a certain length of amount of cuts you receive, the fight gets stopped. You think you're saving the other person by wearing gloves, but in reality, it causes a lot of brain damage over the course of a person's career. And you can see a lot of these boxers just are totally bad shape as they get older. And again, boxing's too popular to outlaw. Anyway, it's an interesting topic, and that's all I can say from here. Action on tonight. Peace.